Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. It's your host, Jaron Smith. I hope you all are doing well. And we're back with another anime themed episode, kind of an episode 2. So in 2025, on I believe March 28th, I made an episode called 2025 Anime Aura Farmers. Solo Leveling came out last year, like season 2 of Solo Leveling, and all the memes with Jinwoo being an aura farmer, that's where I got the title from. And so I figured it would be a good idea to follow it up by talking about, more anime. But before kind of deep diving into the anime, I kind of just wanted to give like a little update about myself. And that is, with everything that has happened in the last 2 months, yes, I am doing better, but at the same time, I think I've already established that, one day I'm completely fine and the next day I'm feeling bad. So what I think I'm just going to start doing with all the emotions that I feel on a day-to-day basis, all the happy, positive ones, all the sad, negative ones, of course, I'm going to let myself feel them. But if I become the villain of someone else's story, whether it's you, someone else, doesn't matter because I am both the hero. I'm okay being the villain of someone else's story to become the hero of my own story. I'm the protagonist of my own story. I'm the main character of my own story. And so I'm going to let all of my emotions further myself as the main character of my own story. So, I want to also acknowledge that I didn't get to watch every anime that I talked about in the first, Anime Aura Farmers episode. And so I'm going to acknowledge, some of the anime that I have not watched like I said I was. And the goal is to watch all of those anime that came out last year to, kind of have a part 2 while at the same time talking about anime that comes out in 2026. So for the 2025 episodes, animes, we're talking about first Fire Force. Yeah, it's been so long since I even watched the first 2 seasons, and I need to start again from the first season just to kind of, understand, the whole concept of the show, which I think I kind of remember some things about, Fire Force as a whole, but, I can't tell you if certain things happened in the first season or the second season, if that makes sense. But I've been seeing on social media that a Soul Eater reboot is very likely going to happen. In which, if that's the case, I'm super excited for it. I say that because I remember, first few days after I moved into college, freshman year, I had asked my brother, I was like, hey, what anime should I watch? He recommended Soul Eater. And so, like, I think before, like, football practice or, like, having to meet for film or something like that, I was watching, like, the first 2 episodes or something like that, right? And my roommate, came in, he realized I was watching Soul Eater. And so then that was basically the very first show, like, we had ever watched. Like, where, like, we're both, like, in the same room, like, watching, the show. Where he had already seen it, but I haven't. So yeah, I loved Soul Eater. I think it was really, really cool. And I think a reboot of that will also be cool. A lot of people were kind of comparing the potential idea of a Soul Eater reboot to a like the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Which, for those of you who know, let me know down in the comments if you think that a Soul Eater reboot has the potential to be like a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Let me know that down below. Now, next, Kaiju number 8. I know season 2 is already a thing, and I know that movie that came out last year. I was unable to go, see that movie, but it is on my list. It is basically going to be right after My Hero Academia Vigilantes, the second season. Over the course of this weekend, I have been watching, My Hero Vigilantes, and it's been really, really good. I am on episode 6. I watched the first 5 episodes. Spoiler alert for those of you who are My Hero Academia fans or Vigilante fans. This is your spoiler warning, which is more so me just describing the episode. So again, spoiler warning. So yeah, in episode 5, we get to see, Midnight. We see Koichi, and I want to say Pop, trying to investigate, like basically it's like a situation with like Trigger, but that happens at like mixers. And so that like it was a whole like situation, like regarding to that, which, the situation was like, dealt with accordingly. And yeah, the next few episodes that I'm going to be able to watch are the Aizawa episodes, which a young Aizawa, which the show was airing weekly, which it just like the last episode for it just came out a few weeks ago. But I remember seeing, like on TikTok, like the little visual, like not even visuals, like the sneak peeks of basically a younger Aizawa and his story, which, I was telling one of my friends that, like, yeah, whenever I've seen Aizawa in, like Vigilantes, like the first few episodes, I just felt really, really bad. Not because, like, I felt really, just really, really bad because I feel like, like with a lot of the stuff that he's saying, he basically unintentionally foreshadowed events that ended up happening to him, which I'm, for the sake of trying not to have too many spoilers, I'm going to keep out the foreshadowings, aspect of it. But I think season 2 of Vigilante so far, I think it's really, really good. And the one spoiler I will give was, it just more so my opinion of Koichi's quirk. I believe it's called Sliding Glide, which from the first season, if I believe how in the first season they explain it correctly, he has to have 3 points of contact, and then basically he can slide around like crazy, and he can like move pretty decently. And then as the show goes on, it kind of like builds onto his quirk and like the potential of his quirk. In season 2, it only kind of continues to build onto his quirk. I think his quirk is really, really cool, and I think for the average person, I think it has a lot of like uses for like the average person. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a quirk that, you can be the number one hero with. Again, I could be proven wrong. I still have several episodes to watch just to see how strong Koichi will get, and if there will even be a season 3 of My Hero, like Academia Vigilantes. I've got no idea. I just think that this quirk will be extremely useful for like the average person. And like when I think of quirks for the average person that are extremely useful, someone whose quirk comes to mind is Deku's mom. I don't remember what her quirk was called, but I'm pretty sure she could levitate small items like toward her. And so for the average person, imagine you're sitting watching TV, with your family, your friends, or just watching TV by yourself. And let's just say maybe you had to get up to go to the kitchen and get some water, but like maybe you sit in a different spot and the remote is, not in your new spot. And you're like, dang, I got to get up. And I get it, me kind of naming a lazy example. You can just use your quirk to levitate that small remote to you so you don't have to get up, which again, I understand. That's kind of a very lazy example of it, but it'd be useful. But I would say a more productive use for Deku's mom's quirk would be, I would imagine she is a great multitasker. Like if you're working, maybe like typing or writing a lot, and like, oh, maybe you need this specific thing, you can just like levitate it to you as long as it's near you. That being a more productive use of the quirk. Like with what I do for work, like a lot of like video editing, like it would be very, very productive if like, I can literally just like sit in like my at my computer, levitate the things I need to my desk and then just start working. That would be my practical use of it. So, kind of going on to the other two animes that were on my 2025 list, were Blue Exorcist season 3, which I had watched all of Blue Exorcist just before season 3 had came out. I have not gotten around to watching season 3, but the one thing I did hear online is they do not like how the main character Rin looks in season 3. Which, I mean, I've seen some screenshots. I'm not sure how I feel about them. I think I just need to, watch the show to kind of have my own thoughts. But I'm not really someone who like is overly critical of like animation or like someone's transformation. Like with how they like look, for example. Um, like I say that in like, I'll give one more spoiler warning for those of you who are My Hero Academia fans. Basically, the final episode, maybe episode or two, we get to see a lot of, class 1A, like older. My guess is maybe in their early to mid 20s. Um, I don't remember off the top of my head how specific the time is from, the end of, the war to, like the very final episode. But yeah, no, some of the characters look like significantly different. I remember seeing some comments like, "Oh, I don't like how so and so looks. I don't like how they look." And like, yeah, they just were being really, really critical. And I was like, you expect, everyone who when they were basically a high school freshman to look the same in their 20s, or like in their early 20s? Like I get it. If you're 14 and then like let's just say they're 21 in the sake of, conversation, if you're 21, you look exactly the same as 14. I don't know. I just think that's unrealistic. So like I think every character in class 1A, like with how they've aged, I think they look very, very realistic. So enough about that. And then the other is I'm going to go back to finishing Psychopath season 2, which I believe when I talked about it the first time, I loved season 1. Season 2, I don't know, it's just weird. I think just the overall vibe of it, I'm just not I just did not like at the time, but I'm going to give it another chance. Other animes to talk about that I need to start back from, the first season is ReZero. Um, my roommate, the same roommate I watched Soul Eater with, essentially, um, he introduced me to ReZero, and I loved it. Um, there's a lot about the show that I don't remember, but to give a small kind of description of the show ReZero, it is called an isekai anime, which basically the main character is transported to like another world. And just for call it another world, I don't mean another world like Mars exactly. I more so mean another world like it's like a fantasy world, so to speak, for lack of better words. And so in these fantasy worlds, like basically like magic, superpowers, stuff like that is normal, right? But for the main character in ReZero, at least from my memory, it's not quite the case. There's still one huge mystery about this main character, and this one mystery about this main character. Yeah, it's incredibly sad. I'm not going to describe the specific mystery slash phenomena. I think that's how you use that. We'll just say phenomenon. I'm not going to describe that exactly because that would be a spoiler. But for those of you who are familiar with ReZero, you will know what I'm hinting at. But season 4 recently just came out, and I believe I never saw season 3. If I had to vaguely describe what I remember from season 2, the main character Subaru, I believe, was going through some trials. I watched this anime subtitled, and the character, I think his name is Garfield, who I just remember for the Japanese, voice actor of Bakugo and My Hero is the same as, the specific character in ReZero. I just remember him a lot through these trials. I don't remember the specifics, but that is just what I do remember. But let me know what you all think about some of these anime. Now we're going to talk about, anime I'm looking forward to in 2026. So first, the first anime I'm looking forward to, it's called Daemons of the Shadow Realm, which this is going to explain why I've been looking forward to it and kind of a review. So the creator of Fullmetal Alchemist, this is their anime, which you can see, kind of some of the character styles are very similar to, Fullmetal Alchemist. And I know the first episode came out a few weeks ago, and on the day of recording this, it is April 12th. The second episode came out yesterday. And just kind of, you know, thinking about, how I feel about, the first two episodes, I think they're really, really good. I think the concept of daemons is really, really interesting. I remember a book that we had to read in college. It was like a whole series. I want to say the book was called The Golden Compass. There was three books. I'm gonna Google it while we speak, but I just remember out of the three, um, yeah, daemons were like a huge thing with it. Um, yeah, yeah, I believe the Golden Compass. Yeah, it is exactly the Golden Compass. That is exactly what I was describing. Daemons were a huge, thing in those books. I'm not 100% sure if they're movies. I want to say it is, but I think they're really, really good. And I'll be honest, the first episode, it pulled me in. By pulled me in, I more so I'm just saying that like, once, like the plot further developed, I was like, oh, okay, I did not expect for this to happen in a very first episode. And season two kind of built upon that. Um, and like it made me kind of wonder, exactly like how things are gonna go down. Just only it opened my curiosity a bit more. And that is me trying to vaguely describe it as much as I can without spoiling it. Um, I'm gonna keep watching it weekly. I'm not sure how far along the manga probably is. I'm sure the manga for it either A is very far or B maybe even close to being done. But I think reading the manga for it would be pretty cool. Um, if I had to rate my enjoyment on the first two episodes, honestly, I'm gonna say at least an 8 out of 10 for both. Um, And Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I believe, is the best anime ever. Yes, I'm making that claim. One of the reasons why I believe it is the best anime ever is simply just because I believe Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is 64 episodes, and out of those 64 episodes, I feel like there's not a bad episode out of those 64. I feel like I always will have respect for when an anime, it has a story to tell. It tells that story, and then they're done. Um, I think that that's really really cool, and I think certain animes just go on for too long, or they just kind of build too much. Like I admire Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood having, like, they have their story, they had their vision, and then they executed it perfectly. I'll be honest, a part of me has wanted to go back. A few months ago, I had watched a lot of the episodes for it again because I probably have. My brother recommended me a long time ago to watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. I got my roommates in college to watch it. I tried to get another person to watch it, but couldn't quite get them into it. It wasn't their thing. No disrespect toward them. Um, but yeah, I think the Daemons of the Shadow Realm is very well animated, and I'm excited to see more. Next on the list was ReZero Season 4. I already kind of talked about, my roommate in college who got me interested, in the anime. And yeah, I'm going to have to restart it, from episode 1. But I've seen a few isekai. I mean, I've seen some of the Rising of the Shield Hero, which I believe I would need to, because that has got a fourth season. I'll need to go back and watch that fourth season. And then we've got That Time I Got Reincarnated by a Slime, which I believe also counts as an isekai anime. But my isekai anime knowledge is not very high. But kind of comparing the three, I think ReZero has the most interesting core concept. I'm not going to explain that core concept again because that, in my opinion, is a huge spoiler. And the spoilers I had already in this episode, yeah, they're spoilers, but they're not groundbreaking spoilers. Another, anime I'm really excited for is Bleach, the finale. This kind of went the Attack on Titan route because I remember when Bleach came back, like for the anime, I was a junior in college. My junior of college would have been 2022 to 2023. It would have been that school year. Um we're in 2026 and I believe it's supposed to come out in July. It went the Attack on Titan route. I believe the first part of the final season for Attack on Titan came out my freshman year of college, which was 2020 2021. I don't remember exactly when it finished. I want to say it finished before I graduated. So, um, I don't need to rewatch this anime from the beginning. I'm going to give a big spoiler warning right now because I am going to describe what I remember from the last episode of Bleach that I watched. I don't remember if it's the first part or the second part. My guess is it's probably the first part. So I remember, again, spoiler warning. Ichigo basically was training with, I believe, Squad Zero. There was the guy who I believe created like the Zanpakuto. Um, there was someone who I believe through food basically helped Ichigo like recover Ichigo's stamina. I don't remember all the other members, but essentially the main villain. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name. I believe it's pronounced Yuha. But I'm just gonna call him Y, the letter Y, for the sake of this conversation. I believe he reached a certain area where people were like, he can't reach this area, which was basically Squad Zero. And one of the members of Squad Zero has a bald head, but he's got a really big beard. He was engaging with the main villain Y, and it looked like he was winning until like the very end. I believe the ending basically was a cliffhanger. And so I would imagine, the very next part or the very next episode probably continues from that, battle, probably wraps it up. So that I do remember. Um, so I'm very excited to pick back up on this anime because when you talk about the big three being One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, maybe not so much today, but a few years ago, I feel like people only really talked about, One Piece and Naruto, which I do understand only because Bleach had such a long gap in between, like where the end, like I guess we'll say the original anime had left off to, them continuing it. But I'm really excited. Ichigo is a very compelling character, and I just wonder how this, it's going to end. So now, really, I'm going to kind of close this off with kind of a review slash or critique. Yes, I have watched Jujutsu Kaisen season 3. I would not be surprised if for next year's Crunchyroll Awards, if it won Anime of the Year because Jujutsu Kaisen is beloved. But here's my thing: I think season 3 is the worst season of the show so far. Like what? Oh my God, Jaren! Jaren doesn't recognize peak. That's what probably some of you are rushing to type right now. I think Jujutsu Kaisen is overhyped. I love the second season. The second season is amazing. I think the second season is the best season by far. Um, I think for me, now maybe the manga does a better job of this. I don't think I've watched an anime where literally every detail matters. By that I mean I feel like even if I watched the show in English, if I was to, let's just say, if I was to look away and I got distracted, you're missing a huge detail. Like every detail matters, which I think that's important. But I feel like the show is so complex that it makes it tough to understand. I almost would have liked it if, we had more of the show to establish, like some of the core concepts of the show. Now, I'm going to give an example of one thing that I find confusing, and maybe one of you in the comments who either A, has read the manga, or B, has a better understanding of the show can explain this to me. I feel like, also spoiler warning, yeah, this is a spoiler warning. I feel like the concept of the show of reversed curse technique is very confusing. I say that because it seems very unique to person. And I don't just mean that not every person can can utilize a reversed curse technique ability. It just seems like how it functions is very different from person to person. So I feel like if one person gave an explanation on reverse curse technique, it might not even apply to another person. It might not even apply at all. So that alone, I just think is crazy. And my friend Kevin had brought up a really, really good point. Essentially, the show starts off with the main characters, they're fighting cursed spirits, and then as the show goes on, they're fighting other like jujutsu sorcerers, and so like the show set up the dynamic of the characters fighting like cursed spirits and exercising them, but you have a completely different dynamic when you're fighting another jujutsu sorcerer. So that kind of shift in, let's just say, storytelling was tough to understand. And with season 3 being of the Culling games, I'm sure I've even seen the memes of it where people are pausing the screen to like write down the rules of the Culling games, which I could explain to you the basics of the Culling game, and which also I mentioned at the beginning of this that this was going to be a critique. I applaud Jujutsu Kaisen for doing something that's so different that they're not trying to tell like let's just say copy and paste of another anime, because like the first season of the show, um in my opinion, it reminded me a lot of Bleach, and there's nothing wrong with that. But season 2 onward, no, I feel like it's truly its own original concept. um but the action scenes in season 3 are insane, very well animated and very well choreographed. I know the manga has been finished for a while, but yeah, my biggest critique is I think the like explanation about the power system in the show I would appreciate it more. And so like I think if anything, I think the concept of cursed energy, domain expansions, reverse curse technique, that's all so unique. It's almost like there's too many different power systems in the show that it's very easy to overlook some of them. And then I had this conversation with Kevin, like, let's just say, like, a week ago. And then, like, the next day, when me, my brother, and Kevin are playing My Hero Ultra Rumble, we were talking about it. And, like, basically, me and Kevin both acknowledged that we all had the same thought. Um, that, the show can be really, really confusing. But I'm just gonna close it off by saying that my goal is in the near future to, with all the animes that I've talked about or did not review in this episode, my goal is to be able to review those animes in a separate episode and kind of just build it off from there. Because I know that a lot of people love anime. Anime is a very mainstream concept, And so I want to try to make anime, a bigger presence on my podcast, which, in 2025, I didn't watch a lot of anime. If anything, I watched a lot of stuff that was not anime. And I want to try to get to that 50-50 balance where I'm watching a lot of stuff that's anime and I'm watching a lot of stuff that's not anime. And the only other thing I really want to talk about in the future is I do plan on making another baseball episode, I believe this week. This week is going to be a very busy week for me, but I'm still going to try to, put in that time and effort and knowledge. I've been watching games. I have been. And the other thing that I do need to talk about next is, make an episode for the NFL draft, which I believe is like somewhere close to April 20th, somewhere around there. But that is all for today's episode of the I Am Passionate podcast. Let me know which anime I talked about is your favorite or you're most excited for or just most interested in down below. And I'll see you in the next episode.